Good morning. I'll go ahead and call to order this hearing of March 14th, 2024 in the matter of case file Z0404-23, Dolphin Solar. My name is Joe Turner. I'm the county's hearings officer. I'll start with some brief announcements and a summary of the process that will follow so everyone understands how you can participate in the hearing today. I start by saying I'm not a county employee. I'm licensed as an attorney and trained as a planner. I serve under contract to the Board of Commissioners. I say that so you know you're getting a somewhat independent review of the application before me today. My role as the hearings officer is to conduct the hearing and make decisions about certain land use matters in Clackamas County. In making those decisions, I'm required to apply the city's existing laws. I am not a policymaker. I don't have the authority to vary from or change the laws. If you think that the laws need to be changed, you can work with Planning Commission and Board of Commissioners to do that. But state law requires that this application be judged based on the laws in effect when the application was filed. As a hearings officer, I'm to provide an unbiased decision maker. And I believe I am unbiased with regard to the application before me today. I've not had any pre-hearing contact with any of the parties regarding the substance of the application, and I don't have any interest in the subject property or any of the surrounding properties. But anyone has the right to challenge my impartiality, to argue that I'm biased in one way or another, and you can do that when it's your opportunity to testify. Procedure will follow. I'll start by asking staff to summarize their staff report, copies of which are available on the county's website. Then the applicant will have an opportunity to present their proposal and respond to the staff report. And then anybody else who wants to say anything about this application in support, in opposition, or with questions or concerns. Once everyone's had an initial opportunity to testify, I will close the record for the public and give the applicant and staff alone an opportunity to respond to the testimony that was offered. If those responses include any new evidence, I'll reopen the public portion and give everybody a chance to respond to that new evidence. Otherwise, I will close the hearing and announce what I'm going to do. Generally, I will issue a written decision within about 2 weeks after the close of the record. I will send my decision to the county. The county will send it to parties of record, so anybody who testifies orally or in writing before the close of the record will receive a copy of my decision when it's issued. Anyone with an interest in this application may offer relevant oral or written testimony, but testimony should be relevant to the applicable approval criteria which are set out in the staff report. Also, please don't repeat testimony offered by yourself or earlier witnesses. Repeating your testimony doesn't make your case any stronger. This is not a popularity contest. Whether everybody loves it or everybody hates it is not an issue I get to consider. The only issue is whether the application does or does not comply with the applicable approval criteria. However, it's important that all parties make their best case to me, as my decisions are final for purposes of the county. My decision may be appealed to the Land Use Board of Appeals, or LUBA, but LUBA generally will not allow new testimony and evidence on appeal. They'll decide any appeal based on the record before me. So if you feel that it's important that myself or any future decision maker knows something about this application, you need to make sure it gets into the record before me. In order to preserve your right to appeal, you or someone expressly representing you must testify orally or in writing before the close of the record. And in order to raise an issue on appeal, someone must have raised that issue before me with enough specificity that people can understand what the issue is. If you feel you need more time to prepare, you can ask me to hold the record open or continue the hearing. If I hold the record open, you'll have an opportunity to submit additional written testimony and evidence before I make a decision. If I continue the hearing, we can come back and do this again at a later date. But whether or not the hearing is continued or the record is held open for any other purpose, state law requires that I hold the record open for an additional week for the applicant alone to submit a final written argument without any new evidence. The applicant can waive that right if they choose. But if anybody else wants me to hold the record open or continue the hearing for any other purpose, you must make that request before the close of the hearing today. When you testify, please begin by stating your name and your full mailing address. Please spell your last name so I get it right. And if you represent someone else, please say so. But that concludes my introduction. I'll ask staff to summarize the technical aspects of how you could participate, and then also give us summarize your staff report.
Great, thank you. This public hearing will be conducted virtually using the Zoom platform. Panelists for today's hearing, which include the hearings officer, county staff, and the applicant, have both audio and video capability. Audience members who have joined the meeting will have their microphones muted unless they wish to testify, in which case they will be called upon to do so by the county staff moderator. Audience members' video will not be turned on at any time. Today's hearing is being recorded as required by law. The county makes every effort to post the recording on the county website later today. There is a designated time during the hearing when it will be open for testimony. The hearings officer will make it clear when this is. If you want to provide testimony, you will utilize the raise hand feature. For attendees on PC and iPad, you have a raise hand button on the Zoom bar, either at the top or bottom of your screen, depending on your device. When the moderator switches you over to provide testimony, your screen will look different for a little while. Primarily, you will see all participants' cameras, not just the one who's speaking. Staff will call upon you when it is time for you to provide your testimony. Please be sure to provide your name and mailing address when you begin. Once you've provided your testimony, your microphone will be muted and your screen will be returned to normal. If the record is left open at the end of the hearing and you wish to submit additional written testimony, you can email your written testimony to me at mlord@clackamas.us, or you can mail it to the Clackamas County Planning and Zoning Division at 150 Beaver Creek Road, Oregon City 97045. My contact email address is also available on the webpage where you found the Zoom link for today's hearing. Testimony must be received by 4 p.m. on the day that the record closes. People who testify and provide their mailing address will receive a copy of the hearings officer's written decision. If you do not wish to testify but would like to receive a copy of the decision, you must provide your email or standard mailing address, either by email to me at mlord@clackamas.us or by entering it into the Zoom chat function during today's hearing. And with that, I'm prepared a PowerPoint presentation that I can share with you that summarizes my staff report. And I will share that now. So again, my name is Melissa Lord. I am representing the Clackamas County Planning and Zoning Division today with regards to land use application file Z0404-23, which is a conditional use permit. This property, the subject lot occupies 2 different tax lots. So the property itself is generally located just off the corner of Dolphin Road and Curtis Road, where the 2 intersect. The property is split zoned. It has both exclusive farm use zoning, or EFU, and timber, or TBR. The combined lot size is about 80 acres. Each tax lot's roughly 40 acres in size. The applicant has proposed to place a photovoltaic solar power generation facility across 12 acres on the property. Because the property is split zoned, about 6 acres of the solar facility is going to be on exclusive farm use zoned property, and about 6 acres will be on property in the timber zone. The 12 acres of solar total will consist of the solar panels, the racking, inverters, overhead poles and lines, and then a perimeter chain link fence. I have detailed in my staff report the recommendation that we've presented is approval with conditions. I won't go into every specific detail for why that is in this presentation, but my staff report has been entered into the record as exhibit number 1, which can be found online if anyone needs further information or detail. Here's an image of the site plan that was provided by the applicant. And so I've outlined the 40 acres in orange that's zoned timber and the 40 acres in pink that's zoned exclusive farm use. And the solar facility, as you can see, will be located straddling between the two tax lot and zoning division line. I'm right near the middle of the property. In the exclusive farm use zone, the use category here is photovoltaic solar power generation facility as a commercial utility facility for the purpose of generating power for public use by sale, subject to this specific OIR section. And that is a conditional use in the exclusive farm use zone. In the timber zoning district, the use is actually called commercial utility facilities for the purpose of generating power. That too is a conditional use in the timber zone. So for both of these reasons, in each zoning district that this project will be located in, the use itself is a conditional use, which necessitates the review of this conditional use permit. Zoning and Development Ordinance Section 1203 relates to the conditional uses, and things that we need to consider include how the characteristics of the property make it suitable for this proposed use. We also look at how the proposed use is not going to alter the character of the neighborhood in any substantial way that would preclude surrounding property owners from using their land in the way that they are authorized to do so. When we look at this, we can consider things like natural features, presence of natural features, topography, existing development on site, things of that nature to help us make this decision. Staff has found that the proposed use will not be visible from the public right of way. It also won't be visible from neighboring properties. There's no changes to the existing farm operation on site. There's about 20 acres or so of land that's currently in farm operation on the property, and there's no proposed changes to that as far as the application materials presented. There are no environmental hazards or features, so things like steep slopes or streams or creeks or anything like that near this development site either. And we also reviewed compliance with the comprehensive plan, the county's comprehensive plan. And there are 3 relevant chapters here, and the policies in those chapters we found to be met with this proposal as well. The Clackamas County Development Engineering Division reviewed this application also and reviewed it in compliance with Section 1007 of our zoning code. And this relates to the roads and connectivity of the site. So it was found that there would be no increase in vehicle trips or changes to vehicular access from the right-of-way. So there's no new driveway or no new access to the right-of-way proposed that would impact the right-of-way. The site is not staffed, so there's no offices, it's not open to the public. And so other than being visited by maintenance crews or just for checking in on the facility, there would be, oh, I'm sorry, I'm echoing what's happening. Okay, there would be no other people visiting this site, and the street is not on a designated transit route either. And so for those reasons, we found compliance with Section 1007 of our zoning code as well. In a similar vein, we looked at parking. Section 1015 talks about parking. Because the facility is not staffed, the development, we really only need to have one parking area available, and that would be for the occasional maintenance vehicle or service vehicle that would come to the site. This application materials have adequately demonstrated that that is possible, and there is space on the site to accommodate for that vehicle to be parked on the subject property rather than, let's say, on the street, for example. Section 1021 relates to solid waste and recycling, so trash and recycling. Again, there's no demand for waste or recycling on site because there's no offices or on-site staff that will be visiting, and it's not open to the public. And so this section we found was not applicable. At the time of this hearing, we've received one public comment, generally in opposition, and that was received this morning, so I will be able to post that onto our website and distribute that to the hearings officer for review following this hearing. But again, staff recommends approval with conditions as outlined in the staff report. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Lord. Is the applicant's opportunity to testify?
Good morning. I'm Kim Pearson. I'm an attorney with Schwabe Williamson Wyatt. I'm here with Jonathan Nelson, who's the principal developer and owner of Dolphin Solar, as well as my colleague Garrett Stevenson. Jonathan's going to kick things off, introducing the project. I'll mop up any legal issues, and then Garrett's here to play lifeguard in case I get in over my head. So with that, I'll let Jonathan start.
Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for setting aside the time for this hearing. I'm Jonathan Nelson of Conifer Energy Partners, the principal developer of Dolphin Solar. I've been developing sites like this in Oregon since 2017, so I have a decent amount of experience. This is, I don't know how many I've done in Clackamas County, but I've been through this process before. So it was a while ago, though, so it's nice to be going through it again with you all. For my presentation, we have that queued up here. Yes,
Yes, we do.
all right. Sorry about that. So for my portion of today, I'm just going to give a brief overview of how these projects fit into the overall resource mix in Oregon, where we're at currently in terms of the broader market in the state. I'll give a overview of our development process, what that entails, then get into some of the project specifics and provide detail on what goes into actually getting these projects constructed and operational. And then we'll address impact to surrounding farm and forest uses, some of the project benefits, and then pass over to my colleague Ken to cover some of the applicable use criteria. So starting at a really kind of high level, looking at how these projects fit into the overall resource mix in Oregon and the Pacific Northwest more broadly. The majority of our power supply comes from hydroelectric dams, most of them on the Columbia River. That's just over half of total electric supply in the state. Fossil fuels are still a pretty high portion of the fuel mix, varying between 25 to 30%. And that really depends on the water year that we've had, because the hydroelectric resource depends largely on snowpack. And so if snowpack's really great, then we'll have a bumper hydro year. If it's less so, then fossil fuels will kind of fill in the gap there. Then about 14% of wind, and then solar and other renewables. Other renewables include stuff like geothermal, and biogas accounts for approximately 5%. Most of the solar installed to date is variable or non-dispatchable because energy storage is still kind of making its inroads into the market. And so what that means from a broader fuel mix perspective is that when the sun's shining, the solar producing. When it's not, fossil fuels are what is I guess balancing out the grid. And so when solar is on, the main fuel that it's displacing is fossil fuel resources, as those are the marginal dispatchable producers in the state. So Oregon ranks about 21st in the nation for total installed solar. That amounts to just over 1,700 megawatts, which is enough to supply 210,000 homes approximately. That represents an investment of more than $2.9 billion and supports about 4,000 jobs in the state. Oops, sorry. And these types of projects, in this presentation, calling utility scale, this project is going to be a community solar project, but utility scale is basically any solar project that's more than a couple acres that's ground mounted. These projects are really a testament to the cost declines in the industry over the last 10 years. Since 2013, that amounts to about a 42% decline in terms of the construction cost to put these projects in the ground. And that's just due to the economies of scale that have happened over the last decade. And these larger projects are the most economically efficient because of those economies of scale. So they have the lowest build cost to get this resource in the ground relative to like rooftop solar, which costs a lot more. And to just give you an idea, this data is a little old, this last bullet point, but the average build cost reached $1 per watt in 2017. That was, at the time that was hit, that was 3 years ahead of the Department of Energy's goal for reaching that cost milestone. Costs have come up in the years since then, just due to inflation and supply chain constraints, but still on the whole, it's the lowest cost method of getting renewable solar power installed and operating in the grid. So now covering some points on our development process. There's a lot that goes into getting these projects in the ground, but from an overarching perspective, it's a relatively simple process. It first begins with our site selection. So we can't just put these projects anywhere we want. It depends on a few factors, and the most important of those are having good access to the electrical grid. Basically, we have to get the power onto the market, and so that means that we're restricted to be within about 4 miles of a local distribution substation. The site has to be free of any major environmental issues, just because when it comes to developing these, our financing partners and the project as a whole doesn't want to take on existing environmental risk. And then we also need an interested landowner. There's a lot of people that are happy with their land as is. There's some people that see this as a great way to diversify their property income or use unused space on their property. And so, we have to have a willing counterparty with a landowner. Once we have those things in place, the first step is submitting an interconnection study application to the local utility. That's about a 9-month to a year process where we go through a series of studies where our engineer and utility engineers are looking at the local electrical infrastructure that the project's going to interconnect to, identifying any grid upgrades that are necessary to accommodate the new generation that will be on the grid, and then eventually an interconnection agreement that spells out what those upgrades are, who pays for them, and all that. And the projects themselves are required by law to basically cover their share of any new incremental upgrades that are required for these projects. So there's no issue of like free ridership or cost, spreading those costs over ratepayers. They're all covered by the project themselves. And then once we have good clarity and certainty on the interconnection, then at that point we initiate this process, working with local county to step through the land use process and get our land use and development permits in place. Yeah, all of that basically has to align with existing county rules and state law for land use. So, there's not really anything outside of the box that is associated with these projects where they're cutting corners on land use requirements or anything. It's all, by the book. So for this project in particular, like Ms. Lord said earlier, it's a 12-acre project on roughly an 80-acre parcel. This one is sized at 2.75 megawatts AC capacity. The AC capacity is the power that's put onto the grid, and what's used by surrounding customers. That's enough to produce about 5.2 million kilowatt hours on a yearly basis, which is an equivalent to demand of about 400 homes in the area. This project is grid tied, so all the energy is going to serve local demand within Portland General Electric territory. And like I mentioned earlier, this project is being developed as a community solar project. And so rather than selling all the power to just one counterparty being a utility, this community solar program basically allows individual customers to opt in to source their power from a locally sited, locally built generating asset rather than from wherever else in the state, whether it be dam on the Columbia River or coal or gas plant elsewhere. Here's a zoomed in view of the site plan. Mel already showed some of this, but it's the project site basically straddles two lots, one zoned EFU on the east side, one zoned timber on the west side. On the EFU parcel, it's not really, well, it is relevant. I don't know if it was mentioned in the staff report explicitly, but we have to cite on EFU parcels, we can't be on class 1 or 2 soils. So that's one way that this roughly 6 acres on the EFU parcel are allowed, is because we're not on high value soils. All the high value soils on the parcel will remain undeveloped, available for farm use in the future. With regards to any view shed concerns, because of the placement of the project, we're not abutting any property lines. It's kind of in the middle of the overall parcel. I just did a measurement before the hearing started. I think we're about 75 feet. The project fence is about 75 feet from the southern property lines, and we're not proposing any clearing outside of the fence except for what's required by the primary fuel break standards in the timber zoning code. So all that goes to say, there's going to remain vegetation, trees around the perimeter of the project. So we don't anticipate really view shed issues being significant for this project. But happy to address that more as needed in the hearing. In terms of construction, these projects are extremely simple. Solar like this is probably the most simple and benign source of power generation we have. It's simply racking solar panels and inverters and electrical equipment. The racking consists of piles that are just pounded down into the ground, nuts and bolts holding additional racking material together, and then the panels attached to that racking, and then the wiring and inverters and the electrical equipment to connect to the grid. And it's a pretty quick process. Projects get built anywhere from 3 to 6 months. And there's experienced contractors in the region that know how to get these things up and running pretty quickly. Covering some factors related to impacts. So like I just mentioned, these types of projects are among the most simple and benign sources of power generation. We mentioned this in our application, but it is technically considered an unmanned facility. There's no staff that has to be on site. It operates by itself, relatively passively. Just when the sun is shining, it's producing, and that energy is going onto the grid. The real material impact is really only on the ground on which it resides, or where it's placed. But even that, all of the equipment is very easily decommissioned and pulled out of the ground so that the area can be just restored to its prior use pretty quickly within less than a year after the project has reached its useful life. There's no perceivable sound or vibration impacts. Nothing's turning or humming like you would have at a traditional generating station. And there's no associated air or water pollution. The only real emitted noise is from inverter fans to just cool some of that equipment. And that's less than the most stringent noise standards in the relevant OARs. In terms of farming and forest activities, it's compatible with nearby agricultural operations on both farm and forest lands. There are no reciprocal negative impacts outside of the fenced area, so that's never been an issue for these projects. They're composed of non-toxic materials, so the primary materials that go into the equipment is steel, silicon, aluminum, and copper. Those don't erode or produce any emissions. In terms of safety, all of it is constructed and operated under local building and electrical codes. There's standard utility lockout measures and relays and circuit breakers that trip if something's awry in the system that shut everything down. And is surrounded by a perimeter security safety fence to prevent trespassing or vandalism. In terms of traffic, as Lord already mentioned this, but there after construction, there really is no significant traffic aside from maybe at most quarterly visits for maintenance or just equipment checks by a pickup truck. So there's no real increase in daily traffic to or from the site. And in terms of glare, sometimes this comes up. These facilities, they're designed and the panels are engineered to absorb light, not reflect it. So that's the primary intent of solar panels broadly, to produce the electricity. And in terms of what may be reflected, that amounts to only approximately 2%. And that's less than compared to surfaces like water or wood shingles. And the mounting angles that is mounted at are such to prevent any significant glare from the systems. And lastly, all of these have to clear FAA approval so that glare is basically not creating hazards higher up in the sky for planes that are traveling in the area. In terms of local benefits, so the mainline one is jobs, initially through the construction and installation process. We estimate that'll employ about 45 high-skilled trade jobs as the project is being constructed. And once it's built and operating, there's a pretty significant value in just providing distributed power for local grid resiliency. Just having that this additional asset as another distributed generating asset in the fuel mix just provides more optionality, more just a more diversity and resiliency for the local grid. And then in terms of local investment and economic development, the total project investment is expected to amount to more than $5 million. And then there's also lease revenues that supplement farm revenues and help increase economic vitality of rural areas from that income. And now we'll cover briefly some of the applicable land use criteria, and I'll pass it over to Mr. Pearson.
Thank you, Jonathan. First, I'll say that staff did a really great job with the report. We, of course, agree with their recommendation to approve this with the conditions. As far as the legislative direction and rulemaking, the Clackamas County Comprehensive Plan, the state clean energy targets, legislation all promote the construction of clean and alternative energy sources. That's solar and wind. And so we understand that there are people who wouldn't like to see solar, would not like to see wind, would not like to see clean energy generally. But we also want to emphasize that that's not part of the criteria. As Ms. Lord pointed out, in this particular case, the solar panels aren't actually visible from the public right of way. Actually drove by there last weekend going up to ski at Mount Hood. I live in Clackamas County as well. I was looking for the property and you can't see that area. So again, we do understand those concerns and we're sympathetic to people who don't want to see that. We don't think that's an issue here. And more importantly, that's not part of the criteria. Ultimately, under both the timber and the EFU zoning, and the equivalent state laws, these are conditionally allowed uses. And this is really just a straightforward application of straightforward criteria. And as the staff report makes clear, all of the criteria are met. So I won't, nobody wants to hear me repeat what was said already, so I'll leave it at that. Except, we'd like to reserve our right to respond to any of the comments in opposition after the opportunity for public comment.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there any, if as soon as this closes, I'll be able to see the rest of my screen, but is there anybody else who'd like to say anything about this application in support, in opposition, or with questions or concerns? If so, please raise your hand now. Fred Ackerman Munson. Looks like you'll need to unmute yourself. There you go.
Can you all hear me?
Yep.
Thanks for the
Good.
opportunity to testify. My name's Fred Ackerman Munson. I live at 20200 Southeast Walgren Road in Damascus, 97089. My wife Sybil and I, our property, the southeast corner abuts the Tillstrom property. And we would just like to, our southeast corner, we'd just like to say that we are 100% in favor of this land use. We have solar panels ourselves on our farm. I wish it was it was cheaper than when we did it 6 years ago, but they have paid themselves off and we have free heat and air conditioning and electricity all year round. So I really applaud the Tillstroms doing this for the community. And frankly, I wouldn't mind if we could see them and more people could see them so more people could know that they could do this, make clean energy on their property and make money.
Thank you, sir. Is there anybody else who'd like to say anything about this application in support, in opposition, or with questions or concerns? And Mr. There we go. I was just going to ask you to raise your hand button. I am not seeing anybody. Anything further from the county?
Nothing. I'll just add that today we're on day 62 of the 150-day review clock, but otherwise I have nothing further to add.
Okay, thank you. Anything further from the applicant?
Nothing further from us, except we don't think that there's any need to leave the record open, that everything's been presented that needs to be.
Okay, I assume you had the opportunity to review the public comment that was submitted, the written comment?
Sorry.
There was one submitted this morning. I haven't seen it yet.
It did come through and we did have a chance to review it.
Okay.
It's the viewscape thing we addressed.
Okay, so you want to waive the applicant's right to submit a final argument or have me close the record today?
I apologize. We actually would like to leave it open for a week.
Okay,
Possibility
With
gets
that-
closed before a week.
that's fine. Okay. With that, I will close the hearing. I will hold the record open for 1 week for the applicant alone to submit a final written argument without any new evidence. Anything. Check my calendar. 14. So the 21st, I'll hold it up until the 21st of March at 4 o'clock. Or is it 3 o'clock for the county?
4 o'clock.
Till 4 o'clock on the 21st of March for the applicant's final argument. If you want to submit that sooner, I'll close the record upon receipt. I will issue my written decision within about 2 weeks after that. I will review the public comment letter, which I haven't received yet, but I will review that before I make my decision. And as I noted, I will send my decision to the county. The county will send it to parties of record. So anybody who has testified will receive a copy of my decision. If you haven't testified but want to receive a copy, you can contact staff and they'll add you to the list of people who will receive my decision. But that concludes our hearing for today. Thank you. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.